Kitchen Underground. I'm Audrey, and today I'll be showing you how to make a sweet potato black bean patty. In addition to sweet potatoes and black beans, we're going to be adding a few more things into this. First off is quinoa. Now, I like to use the red quinoa. You can also use black quinoa or just the regular white variety, depending on what's available at your local store. We also have a little bit of cilantro, some green onions, and a little bit of garlic, and we're going to add a little bit of cumin to spice it up. As you can see, this is a pretty simple recipe with very few ingredients. So we're going to serve it over a little bit of seared red chard, and we're going to make a raw cashew sour cream and spice that up a little bit with some roasted jalapenos. And in addition, I'm going to add a little bit of sliced avocado just because it complements it so well, and also because avocado helps absorb the beta carotene that's found in the sweet potato. Not only does sweet potato satisfy your carb cravings, but it's a good carb. It's complex, so this means that it releases slowly into your bloodstream and you won't have the sugar crash in about an hour after you eat it. It's also really high in magnesium, which is an anti-stress mechanism, so it helps you relax. Next up, we have black beans. Not only are they really high in protein, but also soluble fiber, so they help keep your digestive tract running. Now, if you don't have the time to make black beans from dried beans, you can always just buy a can, but make sure you give them a good rinse before you use them in the recipe. We're also going to use some green onions to add a little bit more complex flavor, and 1 clove of garlic. Fresh herbs are one of my favorite things to use in dishes when cooking, because it brings out so much flavor without having to use extra salt. Cilantro in particular, because not only does it have a really vibrant flavor, but it has so many health benefits as well. It acts as a natural anti-inflammatory, and it also clings to the heavy metals in your system and flushes them out. Oftentimes I like to use red quinoa. It's a little bit pricier than the white quinoa, but not as much as the black, so I kind of go for the one in the middle. Quinoa is a great grain alternative if you're gluten intolerant. It's also antiseptic, so if you're healing from anything, if you have a cut or a bruise, quinoa has great properties to help you with that. So let's get started. The first thing we want to get started with is the sweet potato. I like to roast it whole, so it takes about an hour. And you can also do this the night before if you remember and have time. Basically, all we're going to do is give it a good wash, wrap it in some tin foil, and stick it in the oven at 375 for about an hour, or until it gets really soft. Next, we're going to start soaking our cashews. You can also do this the night before, but I like to do it for at least 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to do 1 cup of cashews, and just fill it with cold water until it goes above them. And we're just going to set this aside while we get started with our other stuff. Next we have the quinoa. Just like the sweet potato and the cashews, you can make this the night before and let it cool off. But it's up to you depending on your time frame and how planned you are in advance. I tend to be a little more last minute, so you know, that's how it goes. But now quinoa, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very interesting grain because it has a very toxic membrane on the outside. So you have to either soak it for about 20 minutes in cold water or rinse it under hot water for about 5 minutes to get rid of it. Otherwise, when you digest it, it's really painful and it doesn't digest very well. For this, we're going to use about 1.5 cups cooked total. So we're going to use about 3/4 cups uncooked, but I always like to make a little extra, so we'll do about a cup and then measure it out once it's cooked. Once you have the quinoa rinsed, you're going to put it in a small to medium saucepan. Now, most recipes call for using a 2-to-1 ratio of water to quinoa, but since it gets rinsed, I find that if I do that, it gets a little bit too mushy. So I do more of like a 1.5 to 1 ratio. So for this recipe, we'll use 1.5 cups of cold water. Once we've combined the cold water and the quinoa, we're going to put it on the stovetop on high, bring it to a boil, and then once it's boiling, turn it down and cover it and let it simmer for about 20 minutes. While our sweet potato and quinoa are cooking, we're going to start washing our greens and assembling our sour cream and the rest of the dish. The Swiss chard is going to be a really nice contrast to the sweet potato with its bitter, crunchy flavor. For it, I like to use a little bit of the stem, but not all of it, so about halfway up. After this is washed, we're just going to set it aside until we're ready to assemble our plate. Next up, we're going to wash our cilantro. Now, if you're really picky, you can de-stem it all, but I kind of like to just break the ends off and then sort through it a little bit. Next, we're going to roast the jalapeno. It takes a little bit of time as well, so we'll stick it in with the sweet potato and let it cook while we're doing other things. For this, we're going to add just a little bit of olive oil and drizzle it right on top. We're going to put it in the oven for about 30 minutes, or until the skin is blistered. Once your sweet potato is cooked, you can feel it because it's really nice and mushy. It can leave a lot of indents. We're going to open it up and take out the inside. We're not going to use the skin for this. And the skin should peel right off. And you can remove any blemishes that are there. You don't want that in there. I just love that vibrant orange color. Let's measure it out. We're gonna use about 1.5 to 2 cups. So this is about a little over. We're gonna only use part of the second half of the potato. Once it's in the bowl, I'm just gonna use a fork to mash it up. So it's been about 20 minutes. Let's check on our quinoa. It's looking good. All the water is gone. It's nice and fluffy. I think it's ready to go. So we're just gonna give it a nice little stir and set it aside until we're ready to use it. Next up, we have 1 cup of black beans. Next, we're going to use 2 green onions. Now, for the green onions, really the only part you want to use is the white part and the very light green. So you're going to cut off the root and cut off the stem. We're going to cut the green onion on a bias. So that means basically you're going to cut it on a diagonal. Now we're just going to add this right into the mixture. Okay. We're also going to use 1 clove of garlic. Now this you're just going to mince up as much as you can. If you have a food processor, you can always stick it in there, but since it's only 1 clove of garlic, I like to just do it by hand. Now we're ready to add our quinoa. For this recipe, we're going to use about 1.5 cups of it. Now we're ready to add our spices. We're going to use 1 teaspoon of sea salt, 1 teaspoon of cumin, about 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1/2 teaspoon of chili powder. We're going to give this an initial stir. Now we're going to add in our chopped cilantro. We're going to do about 1/2 cup. If you really love cilantro, you can always add more. I think our jalapeno is ready to go. I can smell the spicy, delicious flavor of the roasted jalapeno, so let's check on it. It's looking good. It's nice and blistered. So let's set that aside and let it cool, and we'll get going with some of our other stuff. Now it's time to make our cashew sour cream. First, what we're going to do is drain and rinse our cashews. We're going to add these cashews to our blender along with 1/2 cup of water, about 1/2 lemon, and our roasted jalapeno, and a little bit of sea salt. Once your jalapeno is cool, we're going to cut it. We're going to remove the seeds, and it depends on the jalapeno, how big it is, and also how spicy it is. So I'm going to start with 1/2 of it and then taste the sour cream and see if we need to add the rest. This smells like a spicy one. And 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. Now we're going to put the top on. Alright, let's give it a taste. It's really good. You have that nice creamy sweetness from the cashews, and then that bite of the jalapeno right at the end. So for today, I'm going to leave the Swiss chard raw. I'm going to rub it with a little bit of olive oil and a tiny bit of Himalayan sea salt, get it a little bit softer and more digestible. This will add a really nice distinction between the cooked sweet potato patty and the crunchiness of the Swiss chard. So to cut it, I'm just going to get a bunch of it, kind of put it in a roll, and chiffonade it. So for this, I like to use a nice finishing olive oil because you're going to taste that flavor that comes off of it. Probably use about a tablespoon and a few grinds of sea salt. Now we're going to massage the oil and the salt in to make it a little bit softer. So we're ready to form our patties. Before frying all of them, I like to do a small test one just to make sure all the flavors are there. This way you can adjust the salt or the cumin and whatever else you need to add. So I like to heat a small pan and add some olive oil. Once that's hot, we'll do a little test run. You can tell the pan is ready to go and the oil is hot when you tilt it and the lines start streaming down. I just formed a small patty and we're going to put it in the hot pan. And then turn it down to about medium heat and then flip it over in about 3 to 5 minutes once it's cooked. So this is going to make about 6 to 7 patties, depending on how big you make them. To form the patties, I'm just going to take a spoon and then form them in a ball and smash them down with my hands. Once you have your patties formed, you're going to turn your pan on to high heat and let it heat up. The same process we did with the sample one. Now, since these are so sticky, you can either form them right into the pan or use a spatula to kind of get them off the plate. It's been about 5 minutes, so let's check the bottom. We don't want it to be burning. While our burger is finished cooking off, we're going to start assembling the plate. So we have our marinated Swiss chard. We're We're gonna just put a little bit on the base. Next, we're gonna cut our avocado into slices. Around the circumference of the avocado. Pop it open, and that's a good avocado. You don't want it to be brown in any spots, and you want that creamy green color. And then we can use a spoon once our burger is done to pop it right out. So let's check on those burgers. I think they're about ready. We can just take our plate and serve them right onto the Swiss chard from the pan. I'm just gonna check the bottom again to make sure it's cooked. It's looking good, so we can turn our heat off. So fan out a few slices of avocado, take our gorgeous cashew sour cream, spoon a dollop on, maybe a little extra because it's just so good, and finish it with a few sprigs of cilantro. So there we go, a sweet potato black bean burger with a jalapeno cashew sour cream. So join me again next time at the Kitchen Underground for more delicious eats.